spoke to former DA leader Mmusi Maimane regarding Tony Leon labeling him as an experiment gone wrong. Let's talk now to political analyst Ongama Mtimka to get a perspective on how the DA treats its former and current leaders. Ongama, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you might have, caught some of the discussion that we just had with Mmusi Maimane. Certainly, something that has really got a lot of people talking as he was labeled as an experiment gone wrong. Are we surprised, though, because you're someone that has written about this extensively? Are we surprised that things have got to this point?
Good afternoon, Bongiwe, and your viewers. I caught the tail end of that interview. This is not surprising at all. In fact, where I wrote shortly before the 2019 elections that the Democratic Alliance's successful path towards transforming itself and also accepting the inclusion of diversity in its policy thinking was going to place the party at a crossroads to the extent that it was going to lose a particular section of its voter base. But I warned that what it needed to do would be to withstand that period and ensure that it is able to cement the idea that it is serious about attracting the wider majority support before it can actually begin to grow in constituencies that were not traditionally DA constituencies. Obviously, what Tony Leon is talking about is the fact that they, as a narrow group of elites within the party, decided that that was not the strategy of transforming the party in order to attract a more diverse voter base was not one that was going to work. And the reason that they took that strategic direction was being shocked by the predictable departure, by the way, of a very tiny section of the white voter base. And I think that they shot themselves in the foot here because what he calls an experiment was in fact the right trajectory if the DA wanted to grow beyond the minority constituencies, which Tony Leon helped secure in 2004. Obviously, based on his politics, he didn't quite agree with that path, which was championed by Helen Zille initially. That is why even herself, by the way, ended up actually not believing in that because they thought that attracting black leaders would not result in a contestation of the policy position of the party. And that was, in fact, insulting the intelligence of those black leaders because it assumed that it would attract people who would actually just fall in line as opposed to, say, making their own contribution to the politics of the party.
And when one looks at the fact that, this group, as you talk about, that then left the DA because it was not comfortable with this project that Mmusi was now trying to begin. And as you say, the party should have then had some kind of, mechanism to be able to withstand that, that group leaving. But does it then not look like this group that then left the DA, however small, was more powerful and it held a bit more power because that's how things then got to a point where now Mmusi is being called an experiment?
That's where I see some twisted logic in the DA. What makes that group to be powerful is precisely because it is white. And though it represents a conservative constituency within the white population, it sent the party into panic mode because I suppose they thought that maybe they will, with each successive election, there will be a lot more people that leave the party. But there's no factual basis to that because if you look at the majority of black and white voters in South Africa, their disposition is mainly centrist to the extent that it was fallacious to think that you would have in successive elections a lot more white people that leave the Democratic Alliance. But the problem with some of the political vehicles that claim to represent white people in South Africa is that, or that do so without actually claiming, is that they make the assumption that it is them advancing a denialist position that helps advance the cause of an unracial South Africa, when in fact it's quite the opposite. So Mmusi Maimane's politics of being mindful of the dynamics of race in continuing to have a bearing on socio-economic life in South Africa while embracing a liberal politics, that's the approach that Mmusi Maimane was following, as opposed to the one that's preferred by those that are insecure about leaders who could actually build something viable out of integrationist politics, which is not denial-based. But the DA, some leaders within the DA prefer an approach that actually denies the role of race, which is why I believe strongly they've moved the DA from being a futuristic organization to one that looks back, despite their claims to the contrary. They seem to claim that by virtue of removing race from its rhetoric or race as an important consideration in determining socio-economic policy in South Africa, they seem to believe that just by virtue of removing it, they are moving forward, when in fact moving forward is the due consideration being taken while advancing the politics of forgiveness and integration. That's something that's escaping those who claim to be liberal within the DA.
Would you say that Mmusi was naive? I'll tell you why I ask you that question, because when you look at his rapid rise to power within the DA, some say that he was microwaved. He was among the leaders that were microwaved quickly in order to be able to fulfill a certain narrative or objective that they needed at that time. And then you look at how Lindiwe Mazibuko was then treated and the other black leaders within that party on how they were treated. Was he naive into thinking that this was not going to happen to him?
Some may argue so, but I believe Mmusi believed in a project. He believed in an idea, and he took in good faith those that helped him to get there. That some within the ranks of the DA did not appoint or promote black leaders in good faith, understanding that they had latitude to influence policy. That's not his business. His business, he leveraged on an opportunity, believing in good faith that he had a right to contribute to changing the policy offering of the party to offer what he thinks was a futuristic vision of the country. So I don't think he can be blamed for that. I find that now that he is outside of the entrapping politics of the DA, he's able to actually advance that agenda without the baggage of perceptions about representing a party that wants to protect white minority interests. By the way, in the article that I've referred to, I projected this, that there are one of two things that's going to happen. Either some splinter parties are going to break away from the Democratic Alliance as a result of a pushback by those who claim to be liberalists. And what's that going to do is going to actually nail the coffin on the DA's growth path, at least in the short term, in the sense that it will mean those who want to advance an integrationist politics that is grounded in South Africa's racial past, but with a futuristic disposition, are going to preclude the DA from assuming that brand and building something which can attract a wider voter base. And I think that one of the things they failed to consider, those that advanced the strategy of the DA, is to look at how liberal politics in the US has, in fact, embraced elements of redress while advancing centrist or center-right or center-left politics.
Yeah, certainly it is going to be interesting to watch how things unfold from here onwards, because this has been really something that has been unfolding for quite a number of years. Ongama, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. That was political analyst Ongama Mtimka.